Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Sachidananda Mohortaye Nishprapanjaya Shantaye Nidalambaya Te Jase Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivartanam Urvaru Kamiva Bandana Mrityur Mokshya Mamrutaram Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namah Shivaya Gurave Sachidananda Mohortaye Nishprapanjaya Shantaye Niralambaya Te Jase Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardanam Urvaru Kamiva Bandhanam Mrityur Mokshya Mamrutat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Be still. Hi. So here I am, Sally, and I'm here tonight with a wonderful new friend, T. Galloway, and he asked if he could interview me, so I said yes. But before we do that, we should say that you're from the Southeast. You're from Nashville. You're from Atlanta, by way of New York. And let's hear that accent.
That was beautiful hearing you chant there.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk with
yeah.
you.
And so just before we do the interview, I want to say two things. One about you, one about me. About you, you're very much a part of the new media, which is something that I hear about all the time in Hollywood. And that would include, on one level, it would obviously include web series. And you've done a couple. You've done Pop Rocket.
Pop Rocket, yes.
Which has a huge following. And Fallout, right, among others.
In plan.
And probably some of these things make their way to YouTube or whatnot.
Yes, YouTube. There's other outlets that it goes, but mostly they're on YouTube. And just so they gain the exposure, and it's an outlet for the new filmmakers to just put their art out there.
Right. The other thing I wanted to say was just to let the city of West Hollywood know that I got to go Friday night to the Hollywood Bowl and see Barbra Streisand, who was absolutely a miracle. And she sang with her son, Jason, and she cried when she sang with him. And her sister, Rosalind Kind, and her mother. There was a picture of her on the TV, and then you heard her voice singing opera. And she had these three boys, 17, 18, 19, from Italy, singing with her. Amazing show. And I got to say hi and all that backstage. It was amazing. So that's my news of the day. So I'm all yours, whatever you want to ask.
Well, first thing, I was watching the pictures there. How was it working with Paul Newman?
Paul Newman and Robert Redford.
Yeah, Robert Redford.
Actually, it was fast. Well, Paul Newman I met at the Actors Studio when I was younger than you. You know, I was in my 20s. I mean, you're in your 20s, but I was in my very young 20s, and I met him and his wife Joanne Woodward at the Actors Studio. And Robert Redford was never at the Actors Studio, but I met him prior to The Way We Were, which I did with Barbra Streisand. And then when it came time to do The Sting, he told George Roy Hill, the director, that he had this actress in mind, or he had heard that I was reading for it. And George Roy Hill wanted a big, busty showgirl from Las Vegas, and Robert Redford said, no, I really think that we should do Sally Kirkland. And so that's how I got the part, was Robert Redford. Paul Newman, I was very close friends with Scott Newman, his son, who died sort of tragically. And I tried to help Scott by teaching him yoga and meditation and whatnot. And Paul, one time I had lunch with him, and he said, I really want to thank you for helping my son. You know, and that I always remember that really touched his heart, that I was trying to bring in some spiritual teachings for Scott. Hey, Scott in heaven. Yeah, it was great working with them. I mean, to start off at a very young age, working with those guys, and Barbara, you know, you can't ask for more.
No, I would definitely agree with that. Now, what went through your mind? I just want, because as an actor, you dream of winning and holding up those nominations. Well, being nominated and holding up the Golden Globe. And you were in 1988. You were nominated for
for the 1987 film Anna, at the 1988 Oscars for Anna. Yeah.
You had been nominated, but you won the Independent Spirit Award.
Independent Spirit Award and the Golden
for Best
Globe.
Actress.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when you won those?
Well, it really was. It was like hitting a home run, I guess, a really important home run. I felt. I know this sounds really silly, but I felt very validated. You know, I had been working at professional acting for a living since I was 17, and when I did Anna, I was 44, and so that was a long amount of years. I was on stage for at least 10 years in New York, and then I came out to LA to do Staying the Way We Were, A Star Is Born, Cinderella, Liberty, a bunch of movies. And anyway, jump cut to the late 80s, to have a small independent film under $1 million get all the way to the Oscars was extraordinary. And to say I was happy was the understatement. And I got to bring my mother, who died within the year, to the Oscars with my spiritual teacher, John Roger, and my director, Yurick Begayevich. And we all went to the Oscars. I remember Jack Nicholson came across the aisle and with his dark glasses and said, "Mrs. Kirkland, I really want to, congratulate you on your daughter." And she was like, "Wow, Jack Nicholson."
Right, Jack Nicholson. Now, for me, I've had several people help me in life, some mentors, people that have inspired me. Who has been your inspiration, your mentors? Who's came into your life and done that?
Well, there was initially Uta Hagen, who was the first person to tell me I was a comedian. Most people told me I was a dramatic actress. And she said, "They're going to tell you that you're a dramatic actress, but I think you're a comedian." Lee Strasberg, who I studied with for years and years and years and years, and then I taught for at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute for about 20 years. I met Bob Dylan in the early 60s when he was touring with Joan Baez, and both of them were my heroes. But Bob Dylan just blew my mind, and so I always followed him, his career. And when he moved to California, I moved to California. Wherever Bob went, I was going to go. And then I met him briefly in the early 60s, but then I got to know him as a friend in the 70s. They had something called the Rolling Thunder Revue, and I traveled with the Rolling Thunder Revue to Houston, Texas. And watching him work and watching him be so generous with all the musicians and the actors, he was a real mentor. And he went from city to city to city, and he's still going from city to city to city. And more than anybody, he taught me that to be a workaholic was an okay thing. To just keep working no matter what was going on in your life, to keep working, keep working, keep working. And I really learned that from him. And he has an amazing social conscience, So I learned about, reaching out to help those who don't have. I learned a lot of that from the songs he wrote and the poetry. Then I met a woman named Shelley Winters, who became my mentor and my self-appointed godmother. And I lived with her both in New York and LA, and taught her all of her lines for all of her movies. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And she taught me how to survive the acting industry as a woman, because it's a pretty patriarchal society. It's still run by men for the most part. It's getting better. But we need many more women directors and women writers and women producers. And so Shelley taught me basically that it was okay to go on a talk show. When William Morris was saying, well, maybe you better not do Arsenio Hall, Shelley was saying, yes, go on Arsenio Hall in a tight pink spandex dress and wow them. And I remember going on the Rush Limbaugh show, and he put women down, and I threw the water in his face. Why? Because I'd seen Shelley Winters do it with somebody on Johnny Carson. So she taught me how to survive, how to be a ballsy kind of funny, but very truthful woman. And let's see, other mentors. In many ways, Barbara Streisand, who I was just mentioning before, I didn't meet her in the 60s, but she was my first role model as a woman, and so she was kooky and funny, and she'd wear all these bohemian clothes, and I would try and copy her, My mother was fashion editor of Vogue and then Life magazine, and, her friends were Grace Kelly and Audrey Hepburn and Picasso and Andy Warhol. I met Andy Warhol through my mother, and he became my first director in 1964. So that gives you an idea.
Yeah. Explains a lot, man. Now, you mentioned Lee Strasberg.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of actors nowadays, they got the books to go back to, but you had one-on-one. Is there something that you could share that will forever stand out when you were a student to him with your relationship? What is something that will forever stand out between you guys?
Well, I acted a lot in his class, and I was lucky I got to act with Bobby De Niro in his class, and at the Actors Studio, and with Dustin Hoffman in his private classes, and with Al Pacino, not in class, but as a result of a project from the studio off Broadway. So that was the generation that I was a part of. And one day I was in class, and I was doing a scene. I don't know what the scene was, but Lee said, after the scene was over, he said, "Sit on your hands." And so I sat on my hands, and I felt completely stripped naked. And I had been naked in his classes. We had something called Private Moment, and I was the only person that was courageous enough to take off all my clothes. And Lee loved that, of course. I mean, he had taught Marilyn Monroe 2 days down. I was on Tuesdays, she was on Thursdays or whatnot. But I was the one that just had to be the next Marilyn, whatnot. But when I was sitting on my hands, I noticed that people were watching my eyes. And when I was doing my thing with my hands, nervous energy, he would say nervous energy was coming out of my hands. And so they were focused on my hands instead of what was going on here. And he said, when you get to film acting, it's all about what's going on here. And so if you sit on your hands for a while, you'll be aware of how important the close-up is. And that always stuck with me. So I teach my students now about the story about sitting on your hands,
Now, you mentioned it just a minute ago about with Shelley Winters, the women. What is something you could give advice for women that are going after the career and not being used, or whatever may happen to the women?
Well, there are less roles for women than men, for the most part, and there are a lot of roles for very young women in their early 20s, teenagers, early 20s. But the advice I'd give is, first of all, of course, to have great training, to see if you can do plays, to do some theater, to get your chops, to get a lot of range in your acting, to somehow find an agent or a manager that believes in you, and get terrific headshots. And when I taught Sandy Bullock when she was like 23 or so, and she didn't have much credits, so we kind of faked it on her resume. Every scene that she did in class, we made it look like I directed a whole production of it. So it would be The Tempest, directed by Sally Kirkland. What was the play she did? The Trip Back Down, directed by Sally Kirkland. So at one point I got a call from the casting director at Warner Brothers, Barbara Miller, and she said, "I've got this picture and resume from this girl, Sandy Bullock, and your name is all over the resume." And I said, "Oh yeah, hire her. She's going to be a big star." And she said, "Really?" And I said, yeah. And you can usually tell. I mean, I've been a coach 35 years or so I can tell with young people pretty much if they've got it, quote it, whether it's young women or young men. It's important it's important for all young actors starting out to have something else they like to do. I don't care what it is. For me, it was painting, And while I was waiting on tables, I was also having little art shows in Greenwich Village in New York where I would sell my paintings for $15, $20. You know.
Speaking of which, I mean, not only are you a very talented actress with all that wisdom that you're willing to share, but you're an artist. Now, what inspires you to take the brush and vent that outlet? What brings that out?
Well, what comes to mind is color. Like, I love color, and my mother before me loved color. If you saw her stories in Vogue magazine, Life magazine, she was the first person to do Revlon pink. You know, before my mother, no one ever dared to do this shocking pink. You know, so I learned that from my mother, and she was never boring, and I don't think I've ever been boring. I like to paint my body as if it's a canvas. It's the same thing with the canvas. I like to paint women who have purple and yellow hair and, you know, various colors in their auric field. And it's all about, for me, it's really all about color and women. That's what I paint. Yeah.
I've been fortunate enough to see most of your paintings, and they're great works of art. Now, is there anything you could recommend, like for myself or for other actors and talent, preparation for a role? Minutes, even down to the minutes of before you go out there in front of the cameras or on stage. What extra steps that you know of we could take to prepare?
Well, make sure your jaw's loose. That's the sound we work with at Strasbourg. That comes from the lower lungs. If I tried to do that from my upper lungs, I would get laryngitis real quick. So you have to really get in touch with your lower lungs. So that's the sound of relaxation. And then you just check your arms, your legs, your neck, roll your neck around. Make sure you're not holding on to tension in your hands or your arms or your legs or your chest or your jaw. You know. So there's a couple things, if we weren't sitting down I could show you, but we are sitting down. But basically, you don't want to walk into an audition tense. You just don't. Right. So for me, I recommend to students to have, I call it a Walkman, but it's called something else now.
The iPods.
The iPod, something with music. So you can just put the plugs in your ears and listen to some music that opens your heart. Because if your heart's open, you're going to be able to do anything. If you're in your head, then you're going to tense up. And yeah. So it's all about keeping your heart open so you can go to the joy, the rage, the tears, the vulnerability, the happiness. You can do anything if your heart's open. What do? I talk to God right before I go. I'm a big believer in God forever. And so I go into what I call the zone. I don't let anyone in the crew talk to me, or if I'm on a stage for theater, I don't encourage other actors or anybody to talk to me, and I just put myself like in a zone, and I'm thinking about who am I talking to? What do I want from them? Is there an emotional recall that I can use in my own life that is effective for this character I'm about to do? Is there a personalization for me, this character I'm playing, or is this character very close to me? And who I'm talking to, who can I personalize? This scene reminds me of me and my girlfriend Lisa. This scene reminds me of me and my first husband, you know, whatever. And the other one is as if I've had to kill people or come close to it, try to kill people in movies. And that's like very hard because that's not me. You know, here I am, Yogi Sally, you know, Satya, ordained minister, whatever. So I would always think of little children being maimed and hurt and you know, people attempting to kill them. And that would make me so furious that I would come into this rage and out would come the performance. And so that's called an as if I saw a child being, yeah.
And you just apply that to then, in that moment, and you live it. Okay.
Yeah, I do a lot of homework.
Yeah. Building the character.
Yeah.
So you go in, what does your script normally look like? You have the regular type text and you got a whole thing over here.
Yeah.
That's a...
I don't do it so much anymore because all I do is act now, so it's memorized in my head. But I work with, let's say you were teaching me my lines, which you have done, and then I'm thinking, well, okay, so if Coty were Burt Young, who I just acted with in something called Tom in America, you would be many, you'd be like 48 years older or something. But, you know, could I imagine that you're him, and can I see Burt Young when I'm looking at you, and he's portly and balding, and, you know, and hear his voice, kind of a Brooklyn accent, and do sensory work. And sometimes when you go in for an audition, you don't have too much time to do anything except a great cold reading. So you want to come off the page, you want to start at the top of the page, seeing what the first line or two is, and then come off the page. And then if you have to go back to the page, do the best you can to make eye contact with the casting director or whoever's reading with you. And I mean, I could do a whole half hour on cold readings, but basically what I do is I tell actors relaxation, concentration, and imagination are the three most important words.
Oh, wow. Wow. And okay, so taken to that, before they even go in there, they just have to realize is taking those three aspects and then connecting, and reading, coming up, and connecting with that casting director.
Or
That's
whoever
really
they have
big.
reading with you, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, making eye contact and making it personal to you, so you're not just saying words. You've got the idea of what this character wants. Sometimes you can say to the casting director, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on? And they'll very nicely offer information. Sometimes it's all there on the written page, and you know, you just do it.
So you recommend that the actor come in there, ask questions. Don't be afraid.
Well, what I do is I say, feel free to redirect me if you want. And then that gives them a huge freedom to stop me and say, can you try it this way?
Right.
Ron Howard did that with me, and I got Ed TV, you know.
Ron Howard, how was that? I mean, as an actor, you want to build up and work with the best. I mean, how was it working with Ron Howard and Oliver Stone and
a lot of great guys, George Roy Hill,
Yeah.
Sidney Pollack. It was great. Ron Howard loves actors. Ron Howard was an actor. So he really treats actors great. He has so much respect for actors. We rehearsed for about, a week before we started shooting, and he had the cameraman there with a video camera, and he was setting up shots before we started. And if we improv something and he liked it, he would have them write it into the script, you know. Of course, the writers were so incredible, we didn't need much improv.
Right.
Ron Howard is every actor's dream. Oliver Stone is the most intense person I've ever worked with, but I think he told me that I was pretty intense. He said he had never seen anyone cry on cue the way I could, and scream and yell and all of that. Because if you remember the way JFK opens, you see this woman thrown out of the car, and I can't say it on TV, I don't know, you fucking asshole, screaming in some Texas road. And then, you know, you see all the montage of JFK and Jackie in the car and going up the airplane and whatnot. And next thing you know, you see this woman being wheeled into the hospital with bandages, and I'm screaming and yelling, they're gonna kill the president. And so Oliver said, how would you like to do this? And I said, I'd like you to shoot the rehearsal. And he said, great. And so he had someone with an 8mm camera and 16 and 35 in color and black and white all at the same time shooting the rehearsal. So he didn't tell anybody. He just told the other actors there, the people who played the newsmen and the doctors. He just said, we're going to be wheeling in Sally, you know, and just do your lines. And so they didn't know what was going to happen. So he had crew members wheeling me down the corridor, and I'm screaming and into the room, and we do the scene, and we did in one take.
That's it. Wow.
I remember when I was at the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, when they showed JFK, and when that moment happened in the movie, you could have heard a pin drop, because everybody in the audience remembered where they were when they heard the news, the JFK. So my character, Rose Sharami, got to say, they're gonna kill the president. You know, so then later on in the film, they try and they kill me before they were going to bring me in as a witness, you know, but I don't make it. I get killed along with some other women. Yeah.
You got to stop them before they talk, right?
Yeah.
Now, originally you're from New York, and I spent some time in New York before I came here to LA, and I met a lot of theatrical actors there, and I've met some theatrical actors here that have came here. there's a transition that they speak about, and I've performed on the stage myself, but more on the film. But how would you take, you hear him saying, how do you bring it down? What would be your point
well,
on
I
taking?
kind of told you that when I talked about, we have 3 minutes and 21 seconds. When I talked about Lee Strasberg saying, sit on your hands,
Mm-hmm.
he was basically teaching me how to go from theater to film. Because on film, you would never be allowed to do all this crazy stuff I do when I'm being Sally Kirkland for closing. And it's very important to do theater because you learn to project, you learn to be able to breathe and do Shakespeare. I did a lot of Shakespeare. I really think I'm going to talk to the camera, every young actor out there should do theater, whether you're in New York or in LA. Even if you have to do it as salon theater, find somebody's house and put on for a couple nights to play, invite all your friends, just so you experience stage along with film and television. So I think you should do it all. I think everyone should do it all. And of course we have commercials, and now we have YouTube, and you hear these stories of millions of people seeing one little YouTube and suddenly that person is an overnight. Isn't that how Justin Bieber began?
That's it.
Yeah, amazing.
Now, we've seen some new films this year, and who are some of your favorite leading ladies and leading women now? I mean, leading men nowadays.
I have a minute and 56 seconds. Well, I just saw a movie with Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren and Scarlett Johansson called Hitchcock, about Alfred Hitchcock, and that was really a treat with great acting. I mean, those three were a wonderful example of wonderful acting. I cried, I laughed, I cried, I laughed. With the time I have left, I would just like to say a couple things. Thank you for asking me these questions. We can do other shows where you can go through the rest of your notes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to mention that there's a film that I star in called Broken Roads, which is going to be September 14th for a week at the Laemmle Theater in Pasadena. And it's called Broken Roads, and the young actor who's close to your age is named Aidan Bristow. He's wonderful, and it's a extraordinary family drama. And I hope you all will make your way to Pasadena. December 14th is probably the first night, and then for a week at the Laemmle.
Now, can I ask you this, Sally, before we go?
We have to finish up.
Well, I was going to say, is there a way to contact you? Because I know I would recommend you to any actor to study with you. So if there's a way to contact you,
thank you.
I would highly recommend that they do. So.
Because you study with me.
Exactly.
Yeah, SallyKirkland.com. There's a place to write me messages.
Excellent.
And I think you're a wonderful actor. I think we're going to be hearing from you. And you and I did a film called Posey, which has been entered into 50-some odd film festivals, and we'll see what happens.
That's very sweet of you to say. Thank you, Sally.
Yeah, no, you're wonderful. You understand drama and comedy, and you understand how to hold an audience,
Thank you.
I wonder if we're still in the air. I think we're off.